Thank you, Jim. Thanks to you and the Think Tanks and Civil Society program, as well as to Rohinton and the team at CG for making this event and all that goes around it and with it possible. My goal is to just contribute something of an economic baseline thematic for people to play off of. This is a very diverse group of think tanks, a very diverse world we live in. Economics is secondary to many concerns of human rights and certainly with the disease, but it is an important secondary factor in the sense that it comes next causally in the transmission of the disease's effects to society in terms of human welfare and policy concerns. So I want to just start by unfortunately assuring people that the situation is grim, and it is driven by the disease. There is a huge divergence, obviously, between China and Western Europe and certain other countries in East Asia, notably Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, who have managed their disease well from a public health perspective, and the US, the UK, and Brazil and Mexico, who have mismanaged their disease from a public health perspective. The economic differences are quite wide. And I want to emphasize that this isn't a question of the specific dating of the lockdown, as some would have it. It's simply, sadly, about how much reassurance you give people that things are not going to get worse, that uncertainty is rising. The basic economic instinct of people is to adapt, but they will only adapt when they're confident that things are not going to be better if they wait, better if they hold off. And this is what we're seeing now in the US, where states, not just governments, but people are pulling back, realizing mistakes have been made, realizing that they're more exposed. And so in terms of economic bottom line, that means that we are seeing strong recoveries in China, in East Asia, in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, and we should believe these recoveries. They are for real. The US and UK recoveries are delayed, but still coming. And if the people react and the government reacts to their reaction, this is the kind of feedback from facts that Rohinton and Jim were talking about that think tanks can help. That will speed the recovery. The critical questions that remain are the extent to which you close the gap from before. And this is very dependent, not just on public health, but on how much our economies fundamentally change and how quickly we change. There is the direct idea of restructuring, that there will be thousands, if not millions, of small businesses around the world, and businesses in exposed industries like hospitality and tourism and small level retail that will have to change and shrink. But there's also all these positive sides of potential adaptation to the green economy, to a more humane economy, to work from home, and the businesses and opportunities that come out of that as well. And so it will be a test for different countries on their flexibility of how fast they're able to adapt and how much of their economy they're able to reallocate. And this is a difficult question because you wish to be kind and understanding to people who are put out of business through no fault of their own, but you still need to make people get out of sectors that are shrinking and move into new sectors, both capital and most importantly, labor. Think of this as analogous to New Orleans after the floods and the hurricanes, that you want to help people rebuild, but you also don't necessarily want to rebuild all of New Orleans on the floodplain. The same thing is going to have to, time of decisions will have to be made. Looking more globally, this has been, of course, a crisis for many developing countries and emerging markets. It is very difficult to sort out at present what is going on. The first and most notable point, as my colleague Penny Goldberg has pointed out recently, is that the death rate in the developing world has been far, far less than we feared so far based on existing data, and far, far less than in the richer countries that have messed up. And this is partly, it seems, due to demographic differences and health differences, and partly because a lot of preconceived notions about governance and quality of governance don't hold. That countries in Africa, in South Asia, to a lesser degree in Latin America, have been able to perform in ways dealing with the pandemic that rich countries have not. But it's still early days, and we see the struggles in India, and we see the self-imposed struggles in Mexico and Brazil that are going to make it very challenging and very deadly. There are a few themes that I would just emphasize have come out that will be reinforced by the pandemic. Secular stagnation, the slowdown of growth and productivity growth, and the lack of appetite for private investment, the higher risk aversion, this whole bundle, first identified by Larry Summers, is, if anything, deepened and strengthened by the crisis. And so there is more room for public investment, ironically, as Olivier Blanchard has pointed out, from persistent low interest rates, but there is this ongoing stagnation in the rich world. We also know that income inequality is going to rise, and even if it's not income per se, it is going to be the inequality of people who are forced to go out on the front lines to earn a living, whether it's in Delhi or New York, versus the people who are, like us on this call, able to work from home in our virtual backgrounds. We know that the US, China, and the broader China, rest of world tensions in the economic sphere have gotten worse, and we know this is hurting people. This is not just questions of protectionism in the usual sense. We saw the tit for tat leading to even the EU restricting medical exports. We see uncertainty over the questions of vaccine, intellectual property, and distribution. This is a critical area for international cooperation, and it is one where international cooperation should be achievable. And this is where I think a lot of our work at Peterson has gone in recent weeks and months. And I think this group, I know the working groups are considering these issues. The scope for policy, public policy, which we hope to influence to restore the status quo ante, is limited. No matter how much monetary or even fiscal policy does, there are fundamentals at work here. But as Jim and Rohin both said, and I would concur, you must look at the restructuring that's inevitable as an opportunity for creative, positive restructuring of the economy. And that is where I think that the agenda has to go in economics going forward. Finally, I would note the role for experts is something that this think tank group has talked about many times. And of course, experts are getting slammed and ignored, but I think ultimately are being proven right by this disease. And it's acknowledging the limits of knowledge, but still being better than the alternatives of fear and scapegoating. And it's an irony that the central bankers have gotten away with more support than the public health officials in this cycle, which is not something as a former central banker I would ever have imagined. So just to say that for the public health people, don't lose faith. You can win back the support. Thank you very much.